Some have heard me argue that Canada's biggest problems were created by governments playing the short game. Make the announcement, cut the ribbon, get the photograph, tell everyone how historic it is, and then quietly schedule the benefits for some time after the next election and then leave the bill for the next government. All seemed perfectly reasonable at the time. But today, I want to ask a slightly uncomfortable question. What if Mark Carney is actually trying to play the long game? And what if some of the anger directed at him is proving exactly why Canadian governments have avoided the long game for decades? Now, before everyone gets excited, settle down. I'm not defending Mark Carney. I'm not joining his fan club, and I'm certainly not giving the guy a blank check. I'm asking whether we can hold two ideas in our heads at the same time. Carney may be pursuing some necessary long-term investments. He may also be undermining those efforts by governing in a way that asks Canadians to trust him without giving them enough reason to do so. And that is a much bigger problem than one prime minister, one political party, or one bridge.
From the headlines to what's really going on underneath. This is The Canadianist. Real conversations about Canada. What's happening, why it matters, and where it's all heading. Here's Chris.
Hello, fellow Canadians. My name's Christopher M. Michel. This is The Canadianist. Welcome to the podcast. Today is Friday, July 31st, 2026. So a Facebook post caught my attention yesterday because the author argued that Carney should be judged by what his government is building and not simply by what they say. The post ran through almost the entire nation-building deck: infrastructure, housing, defense, domestic production, trade. In short, it argued that Carney is strengthening Canada at home while making us less dependent on the United States. We can debate the size, effectiveness, and the eventual value of every one of those initiatives. An announcement is not an accomplishment. A press release is not a railway, a submarine, or a house. Governments have also been known to occasionally announce the same money more than once and then act surprised when someone notices. But the broader direction is worth examining. Many of Canada's current problems became considerably worse during Justin Trudeau's decade in office. Trudeau was the prime minister, and his government owns the record. That's how responsibility works. But housing shortages, inadequate infrastructure, and basically everything else the Post credited Carney with addressing didn't suddenly appear in 2015. These problems reach back through governments of different political parties and across at least 4 decades. That means our problems can't be explained by simply saying the Liberals did it or the Conservatives did it. Governments from both parties participated in a system that rewarded immediate political benefits and allowed long-term structural problems to accumulate. The short game wins elections. The long game sends the bill before it delivers the benefits. Rebuilding the military, opening new export markets, expanding ports and railways, and everything else, that's a mouthful just to say it, let alone accomplish it in the short term. These are enormous projects, and Canadians may not see the full results for years. But the costs, they arrive immediately. The criticism begins even faster. In fact, the results may not become visible until someone else is sitting in the Prime Minister's chair. Politically, that's a terrible arrangement. So yes, it's entirely possible that some of the frustration surrounding Carney is the political cost of attempting to correct problems that can't be fixed within a single news cycle. People want relief now. They need housing now. They need access to health care yesterday. They need lower costs and greater economic security now. Try telling a family putting groceries back at the checkout that Canada's port capacity could be much stronger by 2034. I'm sure that'll take the sting out of the bill. Critical minerals may be essential to our future, but you can't fry them up for dinner tonight. But that doesn't make the investment unnecessary. Here's the question. Is Carney neglecting the present, or is he laying the foundations for the future? And the honest answer is we just don't know yet. And this is where trust becomes essential. If a government asks Canadians to accept uncertainty today in exchange for benefits tomorrow, it has to explain exactly what they're doing, why they're doing it, what it'll cost, and how Canadians will see whether or not it worked. The government can't simply tell Canadians, trust us, we know what we're doing, and then treat every reasonable question as an inconvenience. We've tried that before. Against our better judgment, many of us ignored our gut and gave the government the benefit of the doubt. It didn't work. That little voice that was telling us something wasn't right turned out to be right. And this brings us to the Gordie Howe International Bridge. Canada financed the bridge. The Prime Minister left Canadians with the understanding that Canada would recover its financing costs before sharing the toll revenue with the United States. Then, the agreement in principle was released. And that agreement says Canada and the United States will share net toll revenue equally for 15 years. It also says it doesn't replace the original 2012 crossing agreement, while leaving the legal, financial, and administrative arrangements to be worked out. Naturally, people had questions. How do the two agreements operate together? When does Canada recover its costs? What exactly was promised to the United States? And what changed between Carney's original explanation and the agreement that was eventually released? Carney acknowledged that he should have been clearer. Fair enough. People occasionally fail to explain themselves clearly. It even happens in politics once in a while. But when your original explanation doesn't appear to match the document, the appropriate response is more scrutiny. Instead, Liberal members of the House of Commons Government Operations Committee blocked proposed hearings that would have examined the agreement and called witnesses. Brilliant. So you have a public already primed to believe that governments hide things. You release an agreement that creates more questions than it answers. Then, when Parliament tries to examine those questions, your MPs stop the hearings. And somehow, the public is supposed to find that reassuring. Blocking the hearings doesn't prove that the bridge agreement is bad. It doesn't prove that Carney betrayed Canada, surrendered to Donald Trump, or secretly traded the bridge for a box of steaks or a red hat. It proves that legitimate questions remain unanswered and that Parliament was prevented from properly investigating them. That is bad enough. Canadians are now left choosing which political team they believe. The government says Canada's interests are protected. The opposition says Carney gave away Canadian revenue. The public is expected to pick a jersey and cheer. That is not democratic accountability. That's political marketing. And this is where two of the foundational provisions that I've proposed come together: democratic renewal and the new Canadian covenant. Democratic renewal concerns the machinery of trust. Who participates in national decisions? How is power distributed? Can Parliament meaningfully scrutinize the government? Can one political party make the decision, explain the decision, control the committee examining the decision, and then prevent that committee from asking more questions? The new Canadian covenant concerns the relationship of trust. What should Canadians be able to expect from the government? What does the government owe the people whose authority it exercises? Trust in Canadian institutions has been declining for years. That distrust wasn't created by Mark Carney alone. It wasn't created by Justin Trudeau alone. It developed across successive governments, repeated controversies, and decades of Canadians feeling that decisions were being made somewhere beyond their reach. But the government of the day inherits responsibility for repairing it. If trust has fallen to 50%, and we need to restore it back to 100, government can't operate at 100% transparency. It needs 150% transparency. Explain more, disclose more, invite more scrutiny, release the evidence, acknowledge the trade-offs. Let parliamentary committees do their jobs. Yes, sometimes that will be uncomfortable. Democracy isn't designed for the comfort of the government. It's not a crisp cotton shirt. It's a pair of work boots, and if no one's getting uncomfortable, no one's doing the work. A government pursuing the long game needs even more transparency, not less, because Canadians are being asked to support decisions whose results they can't see. This is also why democratic reform matters. A healthier parliament with more voices and more hands on the national project wouldn't prevent Canada from making long-term decisions. It would make those decisions stronger. Good ideas survive scrutiny. Weak ideas would be exposed. Agreements would be examined by people beyond the government that negotiated them. More Canadians would see themselves represented in the process, and more political parties would share responsibility for the result. That is how trust is rebuilt. not through slogans, not through another advertisement about working for Canadians, not through a prime minister standing behind a podium insisting everything is fine. Trust is rebuilt by creating institutions that don't require blind trust in the first place. Carney may very well be playing the long game. If he is, the resistance he faces may demonstrate why previous governments avoided it. But he's also making his own job much more difficult than it needs to be. Don't ask Canadians to believe in the destination while hiding parts of the map. Don't acknowledge that your explanation was unclear and then prevent Parliament from seeking clarity. And certainly don't try to rebuild public trust by treating scrutiny as an obstacle to governing. The bridge agreement may eventually prove to be a good deal. It may prove to be a bad one. But until Canadians see the complete arrangement and watch it undergo meaningful parliamentary examination, we're being asked to choose between competing political stories. And that is precisely the problem. Canada needs governments capable of thinking beyond the next election, but it also needs democratic institutions capable of testing what those governments do. The long game matters, but the longer the game, the more trust is required. And when trust is already damaged, transparency is not optional. It is the entire foundation. I'm Christopher M. Michaud, and this has been The Canadianist. If this conversation matters to you, share it and ask yourself a simple question. Should Canadians have to trust their government, or should our democratic institutions give us the ability to verify what it tells us? I'll talk to you next time.
You've been listening to The Canadianist. New episodes daily. Real conversations about Canada. What's happening, why it matters, and where it's all heading. Subscribe and stay connected. The Canadianist.